So good evening, class. Tonight's lecture is going to focus on how to pitch. But before we dive into those slides and materials, wanted to see if anybody had any questions about the customer discovery interviews. I know I went back and forth with a few of you over emails and just wanted to see if there were any questions that folks had, things I could clarify before we get started with tonight's lecture. Yeah, Chloe?
Was there something that you wanted us to submit to prove that we did them or something?
Yep. So you do not have to submit all of the notes for the interviews that you did. I would recommend having like a Google Drive folder where you kind of have a doc for each one so that you can reference them later. What I simply want to ask that everybody does, so I know how many you've done, is to simply add it, and I'll put the link here in the chat, to column D. Just the total number of interviews you've conducted. And as you do more throughout the semester, you can update the number there. The bare minimum, of course, is 10 interviews. The more you do, the more you'll learn, especially as you get feedback from some initial folks and realize you might need to change part of what it is that you think you're building. And Thea, do you have a question?
I think you kind of answered it, but just to confirm, so we can do more because they were kind of fun. I only got to do 10, but is there like a certain due date when we would have to do more, or just throughout the semester?
Throughout the semester, I find that if you do 30 or more, you tend to have a pretty holistic understanding of, hey, this is a thing that people want, or hey, I talked to 30 people and 22 of them are not interested. So maybe that's a sign either you're targeting the wrong type of customer persona. So you can definitely do more throughout the semester. And then I would just ask by May 6th, I think is the last day of classes. You just update that number with the final amount. Alex, do you have another question?
Yeah, so if for these interviews, does it have to be someone who like would be considered part of our customer like segment in particular, or could it be someone who like is an entrepreneur who like has been there, done that, like is talking to you about their struggles, and then maybe like you pitch your product and they give advice?
I would say that's not a customer interview. I think it's more like an informational interview and can certainly be helpful and valuable to get that feedback. But if they're not somebody who would ever, ultimately buy the product or service or has the problem, that is definitely different. Does that make sense? Cool. Let me just get my slides up here. Any other questions before we dive in to how to pitch? Great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen once my slides load. Cool. Can I get a thumbs up? Can folks see the slides all right? Great. So we are going to go through how to pitch tonight. And there are 3 questions you should always ask before any pitch. Who's your audience? What are their expectations? And most importantly, how can they help me accomplish my goals? Because every good pitch has an ask at the end. You never want to get someone's formal or even informal attention to give a pitch and presentation and tell a story and not have something that you can ask for at the end that they can help you with. And it's important to remember the rule of 3. 3 is the magical number for how humans' brains are structured, how they can remember things. You don't want to ask for 7 things, and you probably don't want to ask for just one thing, because there may be a few different ways that people can help. For example, when you are trying to raise money, a lot of people don't actually have money to give you, but they might be able to be an early MVP kind of beta tester of their product. You might be trying to hire people. They might be able to introduce you to potential team members or folks you could work with, partners. So always be open to different ways in which people can help you. And I also want to stress the importance of verbal versus nonverbal communication. So the words that you say only account for 7% of the information being communicated. The tone of voice you use also makes a difference. And if you use your hands a lot, they can impact how you communicate. All right? If you whisper really slow and quiet, it's hard to get your point across. It doesn't mean you have to yell like I did. I'm just demonstrating how you can kind of vary your tone of voice throughout it. It's also pretty important that you're not monotone the entire time, because nobody wants to listen to 5 straight minutes of the exact same Dwight Schrute sounds coming out with no inflection or uh, way of telling what's more exciting. Uh, Both you can pay attention to your eyebrows, and more importantly, you can pay attention to the audience's eyebrows. And so, like, I have my slides right here on my second monitor. I have all of you here on my main screen with the camera, so I can see your beautiful faces, and I can also, most importantly, pay attention to your eyebrows. They are what's basically an insight-o-meter. When people's eyebrows go up, they're interested. When they furrow their brow and they go down, that means they're probably not as interested, maybe a little anger, resentment, you touched on something they don't want to talk about. So as you're pitching and presenting, you want to have perhaps a few different tracks and ways you can go and tell the story, leaning into the topics that people appear to be most interested in. When you're in human form, they may also literally like lean in closer to you. If folks cross their arms, that's probably not a good sign that they're very interested. You know, there are a lot of different types of body language that you will see from people, and it's one of the most valuable skills that no one, except for maybe this lecture, will teach you in college, is learning how to read people's body language. And so if you look on the Google Drive folder, there is one of the folders has a what everybody is telling you, all caps body. And it is a cheat sheet of like 30 pages of different body language things from a former FBI negotiator to help you recognize what people are thinking. And it's also really effective and helpful to identify times when what they're saying is not congruent with what their body is doing. And along with kind of how they crunch up here, pay attention to when people cough. When they cough or when they sneeze, it is literally a visceral reaction of their body not agreeing either with what you said or what they just said back to you. And it's funny, my wife and I both know this. And whenever one of us like sneezes in the middle of trying to say something, we're like, don't pay attention to that. I didn't mean to, but we probably did. And if you as a human being who can translate what others are communicating back with you can understand where there may be misalignment or incongruent things, it can really inform how you structure the conversation, tailor the relationship moving forward, and kind of inform that. So quick question, just shout it out. What emotion are these people feeling? Can you identify without any words how they feel? Go unmute and shout it out if you know.
Excitement.
Excitement? What else?
Like happy, surprised.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, what is this? This is 12 different people all having similar reactions. And we can all tell pretty quickly this is what they're doing. And it is at this age hard-coded into your brains. You don't even have to think. You do kind of subconsciously know what these things are. And so applying that to how you pitch can be really effective. Here's some more various facial reactions what you think about. And here's an example of, you know, a nice looking guy. He's clean cut. He's got a suit and tie on. His shirt's probably tucked in. He shaved more recently than I shaved. And this communicates certain things that are different. Oop. Hold on. I hit the end button instead of this guy who just doesn't know what to do with his hands, and they're kind of going all over the place, and it doesn't really support authentically what it is he's trying to communicate. So you want to think about the eye contact that you have in conversations as well. And you want to look at them the majority of the time, about 2/3 of the time, but also spend some time looking at other people. I don't know exactly how this best plays out in Zoom because you can't really tell which of the little Brady Bunch heads people are looking at. In an in-person scenario, in a post-COVID society, when you're in a small group of, let's say, 3 to 6 people talking, it's a good practice to spend most of the time looking at who's ever talking, as well as some of the time looking at whoever you are most interested in, whether this is a house party in Berleith and there's a cute person that you want to pay attention to and you want them to know you're interested in them. Not only with your eye contact can you do it, you can also do it with your feet. And where your feet are pointed and which person or people are they pointed at can also, God bless you, Maya, can also communicate who you're interested in. And you can read other people, like if their feet are kind of pigeon-toed, like they're probably kind of shy and closed off. If they're much more open and kind of have a broad stance, they're trying to welcome more people into the conversation. And you can read these kind of eye contact and foot cues to welcome people into different groups, to help people who may have something to say but are a little bit more shy or introverted and won't speak up without some prompting. So some other things to look at is when their teeth show up. I'm pretty cognizant of this. I have a pretty big beard, and if I look like that for an entire meeting, it's not very conducive. So I will pretty frequently try to smile and like accent those teeth. So you see a little pearly whites in there. You're like, okay, this guy agrees with what I'm saying. He's nodding his head. This is great. Eyebrows are up. They're like definitely engaged and interested. And every once in a while, I'll just kind of, and like, you can see I'm kind of disengaged. All right. So learning both how to read other people's body language and also developing the self-awareness of what does your body language communicate to the people you're meeting with and potentially pitching and presenting to. So the goal of any pitch is that you're going to tell a story, and any great story leaves the room. So one of my goals with tonight's presentation is that there's at least one of these slides and things that I say that you take with you and you go tell other people about. All right. If we go through 50 minutes and there's nothing worth ever repeating or applying or talking to anybody else about, then I did a shitty job tonight. And my goal is to avoid that by telling some good stories that you want to leave the room. For example, there's this story about the time when Luke and Obi-Wan Kenobi went out to sushi. You guys know this, but they went out to get sushi a few times. And Obi-Wan, he's a master. He's got the chopsticks. He's eating the sushi. It's great. Luke, on the other hand, he cannot get the chopsticks to work. He's picking up the sushi roll, drops it in the soy sauce. It is just not working out well. Finally, Obi-Wan snaps and he goes, Luke, use the forks. There we go. We're gonna let that land and sink in there. And so, that's an example of a short story and thinking about what it is you want to communicate to somebody when you're pitching an idea so that it leaves the room and ultimately passes the roommate or spouse test. So for example, earlier today, I had a sales call with a woman I was trying to get to buy some products. Ultimately, she wasn't going to buy them because her client didn't want them. I still decided to end that conversation by telling the joke I just told you to build a little bit of rapport. She literally laughed out loud. It sucks when everybody's on mute. You can't even tell if the joke lands. I'm trying to read Andres was like nodding. I was like, okay, I got one. And the woman's like, oh my God, that's great. My husband's a Star Wars nerd. I'm totally going to tell him that joke. All right. That is a phenomenal deposit in my relationship bank with this woman because she will likely do business with me later in the year. And I've given her a story that left the call that she's going to go talk about, is going to think about later. She even asked me if I invented the joke, which, by the way, I never invent the jokes. I just have a good job of finding them. So the goal is that when someone's laying in bed at night, they will share part of your story with their roommate or their spouse. And it also means that they're going to be able to remember what the heck you do in a sentence or two max. So the more big words and confusing things and acronyms you use, the less likely people are to remember it. And as we are working towards the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Challenge, where you'll be pitching some ideas later this month, there will be 5 or so judges that are going to hear 8 to 12 startup ideas that night. And most likely there will be 2 to maybe 4 of those ideas that they will remember at the end of the night and be able to tell their partner about. And so thinking about how you craft your narrative and story in a way that is compelling and memorable and remarkable. And so the elements of a story, kind of a narrative arc here, just to lay it out, there's a setting, there's characters, there's a plot, there's a conflict, there's a dip. If you think of every romantic comedy you've ever seen, there's like, oh, they meet, meet cute, they fall in love, this is great, this is great. Oh my God, there's always a dip. For some reason, the protagonist says something stupid. I'll use Wedding Crashers as an example. It's great, but they find out he lied, and then suddenly they're funeral crashing. That is the dip. If you ever find yourself in a funeral crashing like scenario, recognize you are in the dip of a heroic journey, and you're going to need some help from some friends to get back up on your feet and continue climbing that mountain towards that objective that you want to meet. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions kind of about the story arc? Cool. I'm going to bring up one other note here in a second that I will touch on. But first, I want to mention the kindergarten test. So remember when you guys played telephone when you were kids and you would whisper something and the person next to you and they whisper the next person. And by the end, it's very funny and very unlike what it was that you started at. That is basically how word of mouth marketing works. All right. And so understanding that nobody's going to remember verbatim exactly what it is that you said, and they're going to paraphrase some things. And so I'm going to tie back to this rule of 3. If you can repeat a certain key point 3 times, people are much more likely to remember it and be able to articulate it later. If you just say something once and kind of blow over it, they may not have digested it or remember it nearly as much. Jumping back to the story and the pitch, I want to share something called the Pixar Pitch. So if you think about every Pixar movie, it's a pretty simple framework of once upon a time where the setting and characters are developed. Every day, there's this repeatable pattern and habits until one day, something different happened. Because of that, we developed the plot with some rising action and a challenge to overcome. Because of that, we have the dip. Until finally, the protagonist overcomes obstacles and reaches his goal. So I'm going to put this in the chat here as a reference. The chat never shows up when I share my screen, so let me just drop that there. And this is something that I just learned from taking a master class on the art of persuasion from Dan Pink. The second part of it that I want to share as well is kind of 3 essential questions. What do you want the other side to know, to feel, and to do? So at the end of every pitch, there should also be a clear call to action that you want them to take. So we've gone over the business model canvas, and I want to mention it here as a great tool for you to build out your pitch and the story that you want to tell. Obviously, the customer segments probably going to be some of the characters in the story. The channels may involve the setting, the value proposition, and this problem that they want solved, maybe that high objective that they're working towards. And then some of the others kind of float into the different details along the way. And when you put together your slides for the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Challenge, it is definitely a good idea to include one of the slides as your business model canvas, because any somewhat experienced entrepreneur will be able to look at that and in 30 to 60 seconds have a pretty good idea about what it is that you're doing. They're not going to remember it and like have a photographic memory, and that's not how you're going to pass the spouse test, but it is how you're going to rapidly get them to understand your idea and solution. It's also really, really effective in your pitches to cite the number of customer interviews you've conducted. That gives you a lot of street cred, credibility. It gives you traction before you have anybody paying you money or using your product or service. It also says you didn't just ask your mom and your brother and your dog. You actually went out and talked to some strangers. That being said, there is something known as the mom test, or perhaps the grandma test, which basically says whatever your idea is and the solution you want to build, you should be able to describe it in a few sentences to both your grandmother and a 3rd grader. And if one of them can't understand it because you've got too many technical acronyms or things that you're doing, it's going to need to be simplified. There has to be a base level way that you can articulate it that isn't super complex. And with that in mind, you also want it to be something that you wouldn't be embarrassed or ashamed to tell your grandmother or a 3rd grader. I will let your mind imagine some RX-rated things that you may not feel comfortable telling grandma over Thanksgiving dinner, hey, this is what I'm going to use my Jesuit education to go do. So just keep that in mind as we're focusing on some social entrepreneurship and impact you can make. So a few pro tips for Zoom. And I share these because you will need to record your pitches and submit pitch videos in advance. 1, proper lighting. I'll give myself like a 6 out of 10 on lighting. I know I don't have the best lighting. Ideally, there would be like a window right in front of me, not behind me. But if I rotated around 180 degrees, you'd see a bed in the guest room, and I don't really want a bed in the background because that's not the most professional thing. So you want to also think about your angles. Believe it or not, this is not a good way to present. I've been teaching high school students for the past 8 weeks. More than 50% of them, this is how they attend Zoom sessions. It's pretty off-putting. I don't recommend it. I really don't enjoy it. But at some point I just gave up and was like, all right, kids, go watch TikTok. So get yourself in the middle, a little bit above, below, look presentable. All right, have a shirt with a collar. Ladies, look nice. Pants are optional. I would recommend them, but nobody really cares. If you have a nice pair of dress slippers, you can wear your slippers, and set the scene behind you. Don't have a bunch of distractions or like moving objects, and be cognizant of when your microphone and video are on and off, especially if you're working with other team members. When they're talking, go on mute, but still leave your video on, and then be prepared to unmute and go when it's your turn. I'm going to pause there. Does anybody have any questions about these Zoom pro tips or anything that I didn't mention that you guys have found is effective either with other professors or other presentations, things you've seen on Zoom? Yeah, Nicholas?
There are Zoom options to change lighting and appearance through video, and I've heard it's like super useful. And I had a professor show our class how to use that.
Nice. Do you know, could you have any idea how to do that?
Yeah, so I think if you go in the video settings, you can do adjust for low light, touch up my appearance. So as you can see, like my image has changed. And yeah, you can do some of those things.
Sweet. Bushra? Bushra, do you have more to add? She may have frozen.
Sorry, I think I froze. Can you hear me now?
There we go. Yep, we can
Okay.
hear you now.
Sure. So with regards to eye contact on Zoom, I never know, are we supposed to look straight at the camera and that's how we make eye contact? Or are we supposed to look at the photo of the person?
Great question. So I actually have a like yellow sticker right here next to my camera to remind my eyes, like that's where my camera and I should look there instead of looking right here. Like technically I'm making eye contact with Dexter right now, but he has no clue that I'm just staring at him in the bottom left corner of my screen. But I bring it up here, all of you, I think that I'm looking at you. Thea and then Rebecca.
So I was doing a staged reading with a theater company this weekend over Zoom. So it's for acting, but I also think these tips are really applicable to public presentations and stuff. A lot of the actors, they stand when they're doing these presentations on Zoom just because you feel more powerful. Like you would do that in a normal presentation. And if you just rig your camera to stand up, like obviously you wouldn't do it for a class, but if you're doing a really big presentation, you may want to do that. And also I thought this was like a genius hack. Someone put a G.I. Joe doll like right above their camera on their laptop. So like exactly. So you're looking at the face and then no one knows that you're looking at the G.I. Joe and it's like right behind your laptop, right behind the camera. And it's like a little inch up and you couldn't even tell. And I think that's just really funny because it would be ridiculous while you're doing the presentation. It's like the old saying, like, imagine the audience in their underwear. I feel like this is one up. Your audience is a G.I. Joe doll.
Nice. I love that. That is great. Thank you for sharing that. And Rebecca?
Yeah, one thing that I've realized is helpful because when you do a pitch competition via Zoom, you don't have the same adrenaline of getting up in front of an audience, and it can be really distracting, all the noises around you and your own voice. So putting in headphones, even if you don't plug it into your laptop, that changed my life. I didn't realize that I would just not hear myself anymore and it would make me sound more confident and natural.
Nice. That is a great tip. One last one that I'll add as well is to not use the Zoom backgrounds or virtual backgrounds. I think those are pretty distracting because at some point you move a little bit and then your hair gets lost in the background, or I'm just not a fan. And I think finding a decently well-lit normal room background is a lot better than pretending you're on a beach somewhere and like starting the pitch with a joke about how I'm on a beach. Like, yeah, I think regular backgrounds are just fine for what we want to be doing here. So give me 1 second here. I will get my slides back up. Um, 1 second. There we go. All right, can we see that again? Cool. So this is a phenomenal slide and really a story from a book called Steal Like an Artist that was written by Austin Kleon, super creative dude. And the premise here is really important in that you want to steal like an artist. And if you took the Mona Lisa and painted the same thing verbatim and had the same nose and cheekbones and hair and background, that's plagiarism. That's the Mona Lisa. People are going to recognize it. But if you take the Mona Lisa's nose and Maya's glasses and Rohan's hat and Jorge's shirt and put them all together with a beach background, that is a magnificent work of art. That has never been created before, and you officially are an artist. And by the way, you're all already officially artists. You don't get like a little name badge, but just by creating, you can create art, and you can use some of these principles to figure out how to go about taking little bits and pieces from different places, putting them together in a new way that could be a unique solution. This also ties into why we do the 10 ideas every week and that we share them with everybody, because I want you to steal parts of other people's ideas and put them together in new ways and come up with unique ideas and solutions that perhaps no one has ever thought of before because they haven't thought about all of these pieces interacting in the same way. It is also useful to steal from many, to give folks credit where it's due, and to transform or remix it kind of like a DJ. All right, so I am now going to bring up, let's see if this is going to work. I can get the sound going. Give me a second. Skip it. No, thank you. Can you guys hear this? It's a 6-minute video. It's amazing.
Barack Obama in 2004 was totally unknown. People were saying, I don't know who this guy is. I wonder why they picked him.
He had this reputation as a bit of an upstart, as sort of a young, rising figure in the party, but no one knew who this guy was. This was his chance to introduce himself to people.
Tonight is a particular honor for me because, let's face it, my presence on this stage is pretty unlikely. My father was a foreign student, born and raised in a small village in Kenya.
What makes a great political speech is if you can somehow fold your story into this larger American story.
The next thing he says is about his mother's family. His grandfather fought in World War II. He used the GI Bill. They settled in Kansas, so white people could say, he's just like us.
My parents shared not only an improbable love, they shared an abiding faith in the possibilities of this nation. I stand here knowing that my story is part of the larger American story, that I owe a debt to all of those who came before me, and that in no other country on earth is my story even possible.
Going into this speech, we've had 4 years of George Bush, and we felt as a country like we've grown further apart.
2004 was very much a divisive partisan race. Obama's speech is in some ways an antidote to that.
Alongside our famous individualism, there's another ingredient in the American saga, a belief that we're all connected as one people. If there is a child on the south side of Chicago who can't read, that matters to me even if it's not my child. If there's a senior citizen somewhere who can't pay for their prescription drugs and having to choose between medicine and the rent, that makes my life poorer even if it's not my grandparent. It is that fundamental belief, I am my brother's keeper, I am my sister's keeper that makes this country work. E pluribus unum, out of many, one.
He gives a speech that presages his entire political message of 2008, which is this sort of post-partisan argument.
Now, even as we speak, there are those who are preparing to divide us. The spin masters, the negative ad peddlers, who embrace the politics of anything goes. Well, I say to them tonight, there is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America.
Obama was born with two great gifts. One is his mind, and the other is his ability to speak to large groups of people.
There are three things that Obama does that really makes that speech effective. He wants concrete detail. He likes story, and he loves antithesis, the use of repetition in structure to show contrast. There is not a liberal America or a conservative America. There is one America.
There is not a black America and a white America and Latino America and Asian America. There's the United States of America. The pundits like to slice and dice our country into red states and blue states, but I've got news for them too. We worship an awesome God in the blue states, and we don't like federal agents poking around in our libraries in the red states. We coach Little League in the blue states, and yes, we've got some gay friends in the red states. We are one people, all of us pledging allegiance to the Stars and Stripes, all of us defending the United States of America.
The way he uses his hands, he actually points a lot and does a lot of this, and a lot of this, and a lot of that.
In doing so, he gives off this sense of energy. I am new, I'm someone who is dynamic.
And he doesn't do that so much anymore. He's a little more solemn and reserved when he gives speeches today, but I think it's more reflective of his office.
In the end, that's what this election is about. Do we participate in a politics of cynicism, or do we participate in a politics of hope? It's the hope of slaves sitting around a fire singing freedom songs. The hope of immigrants setting out for distant shores. The hope of a young naval lieutenant bravely patrolling the Mekong Delta. The hope of a mill worker's son who dares to defy the odds. The hope of a skinny kid with a funny name who believes that America has a place for him too. Hope in the face of difficulty. Hope in the face of uncertainty. The audacity of hope.
His appearance at that convention, which was the best speech of the convention, better than John Kerry's, was electrifying, and without it, he wouldn't be president.
I think sincerity means a lot. There are people who, when they speak the truth as they see it, and they're very effective doing that.
I believe this country will reclaim its promise, and out of this long political darkness, a brighter day will come. Thank you very much, everybody. God bless you.
What did you think? Would love a minute or two just to hear some thoughts and reflections from seeing our good old friend Barack. Chloe?
I'm actually listening to Michelle Obama's audiobook right now. And I just listened to the part yesterday, I think, where she talks about that speech and how it just totally changed everything for him, how he went from kind of like not a nobody, but nobody really knew who he was, to suddenly everybody wanted this man to be president. And watching it, I think somebody just commented, it gave me chills. Like, I see why now, having seen it.
Thea, and then Maya.
I do think it's worth saying, and I'm going to copy paste a link in the chat, that he is an incredible writer. Like, when he was in law school, he published his first book. He's just really phenomenal at writing. And the picture that I just sent, like, he's very I don't want to say OCD, that's a bad way to say it, but he's a perfectionist when it comes to his speeches, and he will write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. So even though we say the presentation is really important, that the way you, your physicality and your voice is very important, that for him comes easily through refining and refining what he's going to say. And it goes 10 hours into that small speech. And even when he was president, I mean, the picture that I sent was from like 2010. He had a professional staff of speechwriters, and whenever he had a free moment for one of his speeches, he would take his speech and then just kind of rip up all of the hard work that the speechwriter did and make it to his specifications, because if he did not choose a path in politics, he still probably would have been a very great, maybe even famous writer.
Yeah, I love that. Maya next, and then Alex, Jacob, and Pia.
I was just going to talk about, I mean, they mentioned his ability to repeat his message and just like the message of hope in general. And I think I had a class 2 years ago now where we talked about the juxtaposition between Hillary Clinton's inability to like repeat a message and not really have like a concise takeaway from her campaign, and why Trump was so successful because everyone knew like, oh, MAGA is his slogan. And I think it's interesting to look at Obama's incredible ability to like, everyone knew it was hope, and you can hear it throughout the entire speech. It keeps coming back to that. So I think that is like a really brilliant thing that he's capable of.
Like one thing I wanted to add, and so this is like less about necessarily speaking and more about just like existence in general. But so I've had like the opportunity to like be around or like meet both like President Trump and President Obama as well. And like when I was near Obama, it was like a group. Obama like took the time to like shake every single person's hand in the meeting and like came to everybody personally, like introduced himself. And I was kind of like, I know who you are, like really. It's like not, that's what I was like thinking as this was happening. And then Trump was 4 hours late, came for 13 seconds, and then went golfing. So it was just like that very much is like a big difference, you know? And to me that like really like was impactful because it's like, I feel like a lot of famous people like sometimes take the time to like meet every single person, like shake their hands, like whether it's a celebrity on a movie or a politician, like acknowledging the importance of everybody, even if they're not necessarily as famous as the celebrity, whereas like other people don't. I don't want to like name specific politicians, but I kind of already did. And so that was like this big dichotomy as well that I really appreciate from Obama, and how he like values everyone in the room and like seems to make you feel appreciated and known and important, you know.
Absolutely. We'll go to Jacob and then Pia and then Sam, and then we'll roll through the rest of the slides.
I was just going to say, I thought it was interesting how they mentioned in the video that he kind of moderates his tone and how he presents himself based on his position or what he's trying to say. So how like during the Democratic National Convention speech, he was much more like animated and youthful, as opposed to like when he was president, he like used less hand gestures and was more like presidential, one might say. So I think that's applicable in like a bunch of different, whatever you're doing, like kind of just moderate what you're saying and how you present it to kind of what message or what role you're trying to present yourself in. I thought was really interesting and something I hadn't considered before.
Great point, Jacob. Pia, what do you think?
I didn't know if my hand was going to unraise or not. I was just going to add, like, I think it was Mario Cuomo commented on like the sincerity that they got from his speaking and his speeches. And like, I just thought it was interesting that I think that sincerity is very intentional and like planned to some extent, which like, I don't know, in my mind, that seems a little ironic. Like, I feel like to plan and prepare sincerity maybe make something less sincere, but I think that the opposite is true, as Obama showed.
For sure. And Sam, how about you? What do you think?
I just think like there are probably millions of ways you can talk about how you're going to address issues, and just the way that he started telling a story that just resonated with so many people across the world, across the country, just was such a powerful way to tell that story and tell how he's going to make a difference and really like get at the heartstrings of everyone.
Awesome. All right. I just dropped a link in the chat to the slides that we're going to go through. I'm going to go very quickly through the end of them here to make sure we can wrap up on time. And I also want you to have a handy dandy copy of this one sentence pitch template, which is really good to think about, our products or service, who do they help? They define the customer segment. And by the way, you can use the business model canvas to help fill in this Mad Libs. What are the jobs to be done? What's the problem to be solved by reducing this customer pain point and increasing this customer gain, unlike our competitors' value proposition that we're better than. In 2 sentences, do you know how? And here's the pain point or problem you solve. Well, what we do is, and there's your unique value proposition. So that is a very easy one to keep in your back pocket and use when you want to present an idea. And these are designed to be given in an elevator. Of course, no one goes in elevators these days, but there will be a time in your life in the future where I believe you will ride in an elevator and want to share an idea with somebody. And the goal is that that idea looks somewhat like this purple cow. And ironically, we talked about G.I. Joes. I actually have a Seth Godin action figure. This is how much I love Seth Godin, who's the author of this book, Purple Cow. And by the way, you can notice he's got different socks on because that's part of his swag. And so Purple Cow is all about an idea that is remarkable. And it's worth remarking on because if you're driving through a country road, you see a bunch of black and white cows. Eventually, they're not that interesting or exciting, but suddenly you see a purple cow and you're like, whoa, purple cow. Guys, check out this purple cow. That is what you want your presentation to do. You want it to be something that people want to talk about, a story that leaves the room, and relationships are based on communication and trust. And your pitch is a conversation with an invitation for collaboration. So think about that. You're starting a conversation and you're inviting the other people there to collaborate with you, to think about this idea, to give you feedback, to make connections, to buy the product, to tell others about it. So being thoughtful in how you articulate that opportunity can create a significant value for the pitch. So the Greeks talked a lot about logos, ethos, and pathos. And I don't want to dive into the weeds here. I would love for you to reference the slides after class to learn a little bit more, especially on the next slide, about how logos is an appeal to logic and, 2 + 2 = 4, and it's raining, so we need an umbrella. Like, these are pretty logical things. Whereas ethos is an appeal to ethics and focuses a little bit more on the character or credibility of the person. So I think, Pia, you were just talking a little bit about sincerity and how that comes into things, certainly on the ethos side. And then pathos is really, really, really important. And I want to make sure that you do not go into a pitch just focusing on logos and like analytical brain, like, let me tell you, we do A and then B and then C, and then we're going to solve it. It's great. People have to feel. Human beings are not rational beings. We are very emotional characters. And if you can tell a story that evokes emotion and gets some oxytocin or dopamine or serotonin to be released in the audience's brain in the first 30 to 60 seconds, they're going to lean in, their eyebrows are going to go up, and they're going to want to go march in the street and do whatever they can to help you with this amazing cause that you're working on. But that never happens if you don't evoke emotion. If you don't get people to feel certain feelings that you want them to feel, they won't be as invigorated and inspired by the story that you're telling. So here's a little bit more that you can dive into. I'll leave that as a reference on persuasion. Jump into the slides you were going to create for the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Challenge. There is a famous author and presenter and entrepreneur, Guy Kawasaki. He has the 10-20-30 rule. You make 10 slides for 20 minutes, size 30 font. I got some asterisks here because I believe you're going to get 5 minutes to pitch, and it'll be a 5-minute video, 3 to 10 slides. 10 is definitely the upper bound. 30 seconds for a slide is pretty quick. Ironically, that I'm doing these slides pretty quick here, but about 30 to 60 seconds per slide to talk through it. You don't want to have a lot of words on the slides. And when you do have text, you want to make sure that the font is bigger than the oldest person's in the room's age divided by 2. So I'm 34, which means I can play around with size 17 font because I'm pretty sure I'm older than all of you. However, if your judges are 60, that means you're playing the size 30 font game. And that's a pretty good baseline. Have a headline, have an image or two that you can find on Google Images that support it. Like the Ricky Bobby one, what do I do with my hands? Like, that clearly communicates something. I can talk to it intelligently, but you don't want folks to have to be like trying to read the slides like, what's that say? And distracted when they should be listening to you, and the slides should support it. So a quick template order for a presentation. start with the problem, the opportunity, and have some sort of personal / emotional story in slide 1 or 2. Slide 2, get into the value proposition. What is your solution? Then you dive into the business model, who pays you how much for what. The competitive analysis, show that you have done some market research, you know other people, even if it's an old way of doing things. The team, yourself and any other teammates you have working with you, throw some headshots. If you got a Georgetown logo or certain skills that you want to highlight that make you the best person on the planet to solve this problem. Any traction, financial projections. In your cases, I would focus more on highlighting the number of customer interviews you've done, what you've learned from those interviews, and then ultimately having an ask at the end. Some questions you should be prepared to answer during the Q&A. Who's your customer? How you make money? How many customer interviews have you done? What pain point are you solving? And just smile and nod. When anybody asks you a question, smile and nod and say, oh, Rohan, that's a great question. I appreciate you asking that question. It reminds me of a question I'm often asked about, Mike, what's your favorite color? And well, today my favorite color is blue, of course. He didn't actually ask me a question, but I smiled and nodded. I built some rapport. I gave my brain 5 seconds to think about anything. And I slid in an example of bridging where I didn't even answer the question he didn't ask. I asked myself a question that I wanted to talk about to make sure that I could talk about a key point that I thought would strengthen my presentation. So you were born to win, but to win, you must plan to win and then prepare to win so you can show up and expect to win. I expected to win this presentation tonight because I have spent dozens of hours preparing these slides. I've given it several times previously to other classes and groups. I know the material. I love my man Zig Ziglar. And I truly believe that you can have whatever you want in life as long as you help enough other people get what they want in life. And in terms of planning, preparing, and executing, 60% planning, 30% preparing, and then 10% of the time you show up on your stage for a moment of impact when you can do something amazing. Be authentic. And I wanted to quickly show you this. If you go to this website, eship.georgetown.edu.gec, I think I can drop the link right there. This is where you will register and sign up, apply here to pitch for one of these 3 undergrad nights. You can pick the time slots that work for you. It'll be from 6 to 9 East Coast time. You are only going to be there, I believe, for 15 total minutes, but I think last year had more than 40 student teams that were undergrads that applied to pitch. The top 6 will advance to the finals. There are some pro tips here. You can scroll down as well. Oh, look at that handsome guy with a winner, and a really tall guy too. All right. And see the judging criteria, which is also important. Any game you play is easier when you know the rules to the game. So I want to make sure you understand that these are the 4 categories your pitch will be graded on: feasibility, team, values, and overall. Does anybody have any questions about the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Challenge? I believe you have another 2 weeks to formally apply and pick a specific idea and any teammates you want to go through it with. But before we wrap up class tonight, I want to see if anybody has any questions about the pitching material tonight and or the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Challenge.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So if we are interested in getting pitching experience, but we don't necessarily have an idea that we're ready to put into a venture stage, is that still is that okay? If it's we're not necessarily coming up with an idea we think we're going to actively launch in a company format after this, I
totally understand. My hope is that at least half of you are going to take some ideas from this class and go forward and build some things with it, and at least try to come up with a prototype, acquire some customers, because the further you go in the process, the more that you'll be able to learn. I'm cognizant that it's not going to be 100% of you. Irregardless of your plans to go and build this thing forever, it is mandatory for this class to pitch an idea at the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Challenge. So it doesn't have to be something that you're definitely going to do for the next 5 years and drop out of college to work on. It is feasible that it will come to a conclusion in early May, or even a little bit sooner. We'll do a little bit after spring break on kind of moving forward with entrepreneur ideas. But the hope is that you'll get some reps thinking through the different elements of applying the entrepreneurial mindset so that it'll be useful for future ideas you might want to bring into reality. Any other questions? Jacob.
Yeah, it's not related to the pitch competition, and I may have missed this somewhere, but I was looking for the link to the like extra credit event tonight and I couldn't find that anywhere. Oh,
that is
there.
Perfect timing, because I just dropped it in the chat. I'm gonna head out of here in the next 15 seconds. We will wrap this up. I have been teaching high school students for the past 8 weeks. Tonight is their final pitches. They all recorded them last night. I was doing office hours till like 11 to help them get their videos ready. So if you want to see their pitches and cheer them on, it's like a listen only mode with their families and some friends. I welcome you to come. It's normally a 3-hour class. I think it'll be an hour, maybe hour and a half. We'll get through 5 pitches with some Q&A, but it will be good for you, I think, to see what does this format look like? What should we be doing to get ready for the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Challenge? And hopefully you should realize that the bar that high school students set is something you're going to need to step over. Sound good? So there is the link if you want to